Hello, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Once again, appreciate you taking a few moments to listen in. On today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the moving from onboarding a client to having a relationship with a client, and really kind of be sitting in kind of in the onboard process, some things you may want to think about when you're engaging a client. Now, a lot of this conversation will be kind of more in the B2B space than necessarily in the B2C space. So if you're a business out there trying to reach consumers, I think you'll still find some value in this. But a lot of this kind of really sits in the more in the B2B space. And as mentioned before on this particular podcast, if you've heard us before, familiar with us, own an accounting firm, and so a lot of this kind of comes through kind of the view of everything that we've kind of learned on our side as it relates to properly onboarding a client. Some things we need to make sure that we do to the point of building that relationship with the client, and so much of that relationship is going to be built on the front end. And it's going to go everywhere from kind of identifying what needs to happen as it relates to the client, all the way to making sure that we put things in place so that we can effectively work with the client going forward and we give them the experience that we want them to have. So the process of onboarding to making sure that we can build a good, solid relationship with that client. As with most of us in our businesses, we want our clients to come back. We want our clients to stay with us. And if we do everything right on the front end and really kind of set that foundation, it really allows for having a long-term relationship with our client. And so when you start off with a client, so maybe it's a sales call, somebody walks into your door, whatever the case may be, the first thing we obviously want to do is not to move right directly into the sale. And but to really kind of make sure that we have a good, and it doesn't necessarily need to be something that's written out, but a good way of going about identifying with that client what are the pain points that they are experiencing currently. And then so we're and a lot of that's just gonna come through listening. And I kind of start on a lot of the calls and the meetings is, what can I help you with? And because generally they have some particular problem that they're wanting solved. And when somebody takes their car into an oil change place, it's kind of obvious that they're needing an oil change. However, there may be other things that they need. And so a lot of times that listening will allow for not necessarily an upsell, although that can be a possibility, but really kind of understanding what is it that we can do to really help that the clients, the potential clients' pain points. And many times, and if you have a lot of experience in business, a lot of times when you're listening to a prospective client, a lot of things that they tell you are the pain points isn't necessarily the problem. So what they think is the problem sometimes isn't necessarily the problem, but that's what we're there for. We're truly there. We can be like doctors. Okay, we're going to take all of the information and we're going to do a little bit of testing and to kind of determine what is the best solution for this client to resolve their pain points. Someone can go into a doctor's office and have a headache, okay, but their head may not be the problem. Okay, it may be another problem, another issue that's creating the problem. And so the first thing we want to do is to set the objectives with that particular client. And that's going to come through effective listening primarily. It's not talking. I think all of us have gone through, we've had those experiences with people who are overly sales like. And so they're constantly just trying to sell. This last Saturday, we went and my son bought his first vehicle. And as we were sitting in there, and the sales guy was someone that I knew, I happened to coach him in wrestling, and just a phenomenal experience on that end. But then we went into the finance portion. The guy was horrible, just horrendous. He was condescending to me, and basically, I didn't know what I was talking about, and all this type of thing. And guess what? He was trying to upsell. Well, guess what? He definitely did not, first of all, listen to identify the problem, and then secondly, completely missed the mark on the problem that we were trying to solve. He was just simply trying to upsell. And of course, I understood it was profitable to him and that type of thing. And so we don't want to be that way. Okay, we want to be good listeners. So a lot of the problem identification is going to come through the listening component, and then and then doing the diagnosis. So taking the appropriate amount of time to truly diagnose the problem. So not to have that knee-jerk reaction. Well, you need this, and this. But to really kind of take your time and be patient to listen, and then to make sure that we properly diagnose whatever that problem is so we can produce good solutions. So once we've done that, once we've identified the problem that needs to be solved, then at that point we're going to really begin to define the deliverables and also the timelines. So in our world, if we're doing a tax return, obviously the timelines are rather clear. Okay, but that's not the case in everything that we do, and it's probably not the case in your business either. So what are the deliverables? What are we going to provide for the client, whether it's a service or a product? And then what is the timeline that particular deliverable is going to be delivered? Okay, it's going to be produced to the client. And that may come directly from the client. We need XYZ by this date, or it may be one of those situations to where maybe we're dealing with supply chains or some other issues, staffing issues, whatever the case may be, and we let the client know this is the expected timeline that she should receive either the product or the service, whether it's immediate or at some point in the future. So once you've identified the problem, you're going to define what those deliverables are, and then you're going to set the timelines. Now, internally, so we're going to transition to internally with your particular team. And so at that point, you're going to transition and really kind of work with your team and making sure that those responsibilities are assigned. So who's going to do what inside of the business to make sure that that client has a good client experience and has a good experience with your business. Many times it's going to come through you as the owner or the salesperson meeting with the individuals that are going to be involved with this client, and then let them know this is kind of everything that you've gone through to that point, and then whoever's assigning those duties that they're involved as well. So assign the responsibilities. Next, everyone that's involved in the process receives regular status updates. Now, for some businesses, they do this through team meetings. It may be in smaller meetings or in individual meetings if it's just one or two people that are involved. So making sure that you have those regular times that you're meeting, you as the business owner, that you're meeting with those individuals to make sure that the objectives are still clear, that the timelines are being met, and everyone's clear where they fit in the process. And so during this process, of course, on the front end, you're going to introduce whoever's involved to that particular to that client. And so once the responsibilities have been assigned, then you go back to the client and say, these are the people that you're going to be working with to produce this deliverable. And so during the course of the process, those individuals that are involved, as well as either the manager, the person over those people, or you as the business owner, if you're essentially managing everything in the business, but you're having regular updates as it relates to that particular client to make sure that those clients' needs are being met, and that any sort of issues that the team member may be having with the client, that it can be resolved and kind of get ahead of any sort of potential problems. Next, a project leader focuses on implementation, but not necessarily with the day-to-day tasks. So once those responsibilities are signed, you're going to have someone. And so here on our team, I have one person. So once I kind of hand that off, that person is kind of overseeing a lot of the process. Now, this isn't necessarily a day-to-day thing. Okay, the day-to-day is obviously done with the remainder of your team, but you need to have someone that's kind of on point, that's doing the facilitation internally as it relates to making sure that they understand the objectives and that the implementation piece is there. During this process, you want to make sure that you have well documented the client's policies, procedures, and approval hierarchies. And I think it's also extremely important to also understand their tech stack if you're going to be working with this client. So you really kind of have an understanding of who sits where on their side. What is their organizational structure? What is the tech stack? How are we going to communicate with them? Okay, so you have a good understanding. Does the client prefer to be receive text messages, emails? Do you have some sort of internal communication? Is there a portal, something that's involved, and that you understand this is how they prefer to communicate, and to make sure that you're pliable and you're flexible with how they prefer to be communicated with. Okay, of course, we understand there's privacy issues and things of that nature, and at times there's necessities and portals, for example, that type of thing. But for a lot of the regular dialogue, just find out how that particular client prefers to be communicated with, and that everybody that's involved with that client understands it. That this particular client, prefers to receive a text message if there's a problem. This client prefers an email. This client prefers just for you to pick up the phone and call them. Okay, so whatever the case may be. So all of that needs to be documented internally. And so understanding what their policies and procedures are on their end. This comes everywhere from who on their team needs to receive the information if there's a question, From the billing side, how does this client get billed? Who does it go to? And to make sure that there's a really good understanding of how does that particular client operate. Next, how do we improve their particular business? So if we're in the B2B space or even in the B2C space, if we're in the B2C space, make sure that client has a good experience. That is then true in the B2B space. But what is the objectives ultimately that we're trying to meet? And so essentially, when we're working with a client, we're trying to solve a particular problem. And are we meeting those objectives? Have they come to us because they're looking for some issue with maybe improving efficiency or saving money with us? Maybe they're coming to us trying to save on taxes, or they're trying to scale their business. They're trying to identify pain points in their business as it relates to overspends, whatever it may be. But when we're working with that client, we're looking outside of just the specific deliverables that we're providing for them. A client may come to us and just want a tax return completed, but I may take the time to look into that business and say, okay, where maybe are there other problems I can help, or I can see that maybe I can help this client with. And so we're always kind of over delivering with that particular client, and that will also can open doors and opportunities to increase your revenue with that particular client. Okay, but even if it doesn't, you're really working to try to deliver more than was promised, and to really give that customer a good client experience. So we're looking into how can we improve the client's business, how can we improve the customer's life, and wherever that may fall, as we're working with that particular client. And then lastly, making sure that we're setting quantifiable objectives and how progress is to be measured and communicated. And so whether that comes through some sort of a monthly report, whether that comes through customer feedback, however that is done, make sure that there are objectives both on the client side and those measurables on the client side as well as on your side as the business owner. So you're going through and saying, okay, have we met the objectives with this client? Have we done the things that we were supposed to do? And then are we measuring? Do we have a mechanism in which to measure that client experience, to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to on our end? The client is objectives are being met, but there needs to be a measurement component. And so whatever that may look like in that relationship that we're doing it. And so, and a lot of times internally, that's going to come through dialogue with clients or with your team members. So you're going to go through and you're going to ask those questions, and that may come through in a team meeting. So you're going through, okay, with this particular client, have we done this? Have we done this? Have we done this? How is the communication going with the client? Have we seen any issues with the particular client? And is that particular client has their business improved as well? Are we seeing improvements in the P&L? Are we seeing cost reductions? Are we seeing an improvement in efficiencies? And so as we're going through and we're sending these quantifiable measurements to the customer, we're also going to be doing the same thing internally, analyzing them and making sure that whatever that we are doing for that particular client is improving the client's business, or is including or is improving the customer's life. So onboarding the client, make sure you have there's a good onboard experience, all the way to making sure that there's a good relationship with that client going forward. So to do that, we're going to set the objectives. We're going to define deliverables in the timeline. We're going to assign responsibilities, who's going to be involved. All involved in the process receives regular status updates. The project leader, you may call that an integrator, whatever the case may be, inside of your business, they focus on the implementation, not necessarily with the day-to-day tasks. You're going to document all the clients' policies, procedures, approval hierarchies, their tech stack, their org chart, how they prefer to be communicated with. And then you're always looking to see how are ways that you can improve the client's business. And then last, making sure that you have those quantifiable objectives that are set, that you can measure your progress with the client, and the client's able to measure their progress as it relates to their experience with you as well. Hopefully this particular podcast brought you value. This is Josh Belk once again with the Belk on Business podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you much. Have a wonderful day.